There is a phenomenon called sundowning. It presents predominantly in the elderly, those suffering with dementia and Alzheimer's. As the sun begins to drop and the light starts to fade, a change can come over these patients. It's not a disease or an illness, but rather a collection of symptoms that appear to be triggered by the darkness. The state of confusion begins to set in during the afternoon and continues to grow and progress as the night goes on and on. It usually starts with general confusion. A person might feel like they're in the wrong place or need to do a chore that doesn't exist. This confusion can lead to agitation, anxiety, and then progress into arguments, shouting, and fear. Nursing homes and geriatric wards can become chaotic places as the sun sets. I witnessed this firsthand when my grandmother was in the hospital. The first night we stayed with her, my mom, who's a nurse, leaned over to me and said, "It's about to get very lively in here." I couldn't understand. It was bedtime. But for people with dementia, when night comes and the exhaustion from the day begins to drain them mentally and physically, this can really trouble and upset them, exacerbate their confusion, and leave them feeling very distressed. And my mom was right. There was one full ward of patients pacing, yelling, wandering around confused, asking to call their families, while nurses tried to quell the nonsensical upheaval. It's a frightening thing to see. Troubling, distressing, and very, very sad. Places like hospitals, hospices, and nursing homes see a lot of elderly patients pass. And I often wonder if those who haunt those establishments still suffer from sundowning. Perhaps that's why activity increases and strange things happen in the dark. Maybe it's like an energy imprint on the building. Maybe over decades of cultivating strange activity in the dark, these structures are now conditioned to harvest anxiety, confusion, and disorientation as night floods the halls. Hello and welcome to episode 28 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. 50 miles northwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, lies the small town of Newcastle, the county seat of Lawrence County. This quaint historic town is home to the austere and imposing View Manor. This building has reportedly been haunted since its inception, and we were lucky enough to speak to several of the staff members about the incredible activity that they experience daily. Melissa joins us first to introduce us to this mammoth building and the history that has shaped it into the facility that it is today. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch. Episode 28, Haunted Hillview Manor.
Haunted Hillview Manor actually got its start as the Lawrence County Poor Farm. There was originally another poor farm down the road, but there were overcrowding, structural issues. So they built this in 1925, and it opened its doors October 19th of 1926.
When the Lawrence County Poor Farm first opened its doors, it was a state-of-the-art facility that housed the poor, homeless, indigent, mentally ill, elderly, and those who were recently released from prison. The idea was that it would be a place of refuge for those severely in need of help.
They called them inmates here. It wasn't really a very polite term, but it was 1926. It was a working poor farm. So if you lived here, you worked in some capacity. You either worked on the farm, the kitchens, the laundries, something like that. There were vocational training rooms because the goal was for them to not be permanent residents, to get them trained in some type of job skills so that they could go back out in the world, rejoin society, that kind of thing. The original caretakers were elected. They were Mary and Perry Snyder, and they actually lived on site. There's an apartment on the second floor. They moved in with their children and a staff and the first 20 inmates. They ran the facility until 1944, when we like to say bad record keeping caught up with them, because one of the county cemeteries was out back. And if people have heard of Hillview, they usually see the tagline, 10,000 souls have passed through here. Well, technically, yes, but not actually.
Because one of the county cemeteries used to lie behind Hillview Manor, if you died anywhere in the county, your body would have to come through and be processed in the manor, regardless of whether you died there or not.
So it was discovered after a storm came through that the Snyders were creating basically mass graves. They were burying like 9 and 10 people in the same plot. I mean, it's bad enough that you're buried in what we call a potter's field. Like you didn't get a headstone, you got a little concrete disc with a number on it, and that was it.
Why were the Snyders doing this? Well, most likely, money. The more bodies they processed and interred, the more they could invoice the county for. They were not only stealing from the town, but they were also stealing a dignified burial from those poor souls.
From what we understand, under the Snyders, life here probably wasn't very great. The more research we do, the Snyders were not very good people. They did not treat the people with, the respect that they deserved. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you should be treated terribly. And from what we understand, they weren't very good. And there were a lot of mysterious deaths while they were there. Again, this is all research that we're doing. We don't have any hard concrete proof, but it's, you get enough pieces of a puzzle, you start to see the picture.
The Snyders were the ones who called the residents inmates. And to be clear, they were not inmates, prisoners, or detainees. These were impoverished citizens who were destitute, poverty-stricken, and sometimes very unwell. However, it does speak volumes about how the Snyders viewed their charges.
Obviously, they were removed from the facility as caretakers, and a variety of other caretakers came through the facility until the 60s, when the need for a poor farm kind of went away and the need for a skilled care facility became more important.
In the mid-60s, the once poor farm began to evolve into a skilled nursing facility. In the 1970s, 3 more stories were added to the building, along with a new basement, new cafeteria, and an entire new wing called One North. After the massive remodel was complete, the facility reopened in 1977 with the new name Hillview Manor.
Then it ran as a nursing home until 2004, when overcrowding and more structural issues became a problem, and the county decided to close the facility. In 2005, the current owner's mother purchased it at auction with the intent of turning it into apartments. She likes the very classic architecture of the building with the bricks and the stone. But once they got in here and began renovating, they realized that it really wasn't suited for apartments, but they thought maybe it could be used for other business purposes, like business suites, things like that. Well, one day while they were working, people called and said, "Hey, can we come in and ghost hunt? We've heard the place is really haunted." And this is 2005. This is before most of the television shows were on. And they were like, sure, whatever. And that kind of, brings us up to date. This place has a history of being haunted for as long as the facility existed.
And it's not just Melissa who feels that the building is spirited. I also spoke with Ken and Sue, 2 other staff members, about their experiences within the manor.
So not only is the building haunted, the grounds are haunted, the garages out back are haunted.
Yes, this is definitely one of the most haunted places in Pennsylvania.
What's fascinating is that even though everyone is in agreement that the area has been haunted since before the current building was even ever erected, when the manor was turned into a nursing home in the 70s, the energy may have shifted.
During the nursing home, every single previous staff member that we have who came here said this was the favorite place that they ever worked. That the residents were just wonderful, colorful, hysterical people that, you know, they were treated like a family when they were here. And every one of them, like the one girl works at the local nursing home. And she said no other job compared to working here. She was here. She was one of the last staff members out when they closed in 2004.
And even though the nursing home closed nearly 20 years ago, plenty of its original residents still call Hillview Manor home.
Music is a really big trigger in this facility. Different music, like the different spirits, like different music, different areas. So that's a really great way to, you know, use a trigger object. And it was about 1:30 in the morning. We had one hallway here that the spirit was a gentleman named Angelo. And he was 51 years old. He died in 1939. He was found hanging in the bathroom, the men's bathroom. Angelo gets very upset if you asked him if he took his own life. He insists he was not, that he did not kill himself. You can ask him what happened, but if you use the S word, suicide, he'll shut activity down in that hallway, sometimes on the whole second floor. He gets very upset. So again, over the years, we've been communicating with him, psychics, mediums, things like that. And he is insistent that he was murdered.
There's been a lot of research into why Angelo may have been murdered. Through many mediums, psychics, and EVP sessions, it has been uncovered that Angelo may have been gay. When Angelo died in 1939, it's completely conceivable that some of the residents may have found out Angelo's secret and murdered him and made it look like a suicide. Of course, we can't definitively prove this theory, but many mediums and psychics have relayed this message without having any prior knowledge of the theory beforehand.
Angelo's hallway is probably one of our busiest hallways. I love it because we also call it the noisy hallway. It's a really great area. You just sit in the hallway and we tell everybody, let the activity come to you. If you go after the activity, you're going to be chasing it all night. Like we'll sit there and you'll hear footsteps at the end of the hallway. If you go down, then they'll be behind you to the right. And if you go down to the right, then they'll be off to the left. It's like they're playing some big giant game with you. And I think that they're having fun with us, basically. And so we'll just sit there, we'll show people what will happen. But if you just sit there and let the activity come to you, next thing you know, you're hearing conversations like in the room next to you that you're looking into, you can see nobody's in there, but you can hear entire conversations. We'll hear music playing. We've had stuff moved all the way down the hallway. We were coming into his hallway. It's at the end of a hallway, like our building is one long hallway from end to end, and then those are like off wings. And we were making the turn into it, and there were double doors. And there were three of us, and we were like coming along, and we were singing to try and hopefully stir up a little bit of activity. As we made the corner, the doors slammed in our face. And I mean slammed so hard, I didn't know I could jump backwards that far. And now this was a nursing home. Those are like the cushioned ward doors like you'd find at a hospital, the ones that shh. We tried for over an hour to get them to slam, and they wouldn't slam. They cushion closed. They slammed so hard that they splintered the wooden doorstop that was holding it open, and they took a divot out of the tile in the floor. So apparently they had opinions about David Bowie that were not appreciated. I thought we sounded okay, but yeah, and it was the wildest. There were three of us there. Like I said, we tried to recreate that for over an hour and couldn't do it.
If you leave the second floor and head down to the boiler room, there is another one of Hillview's famous ghostly friends.
Eli was an original resident, and he worked in the boiler room. He was the maintenance tech in the late 20s. And Eli was also, unfortunately, an alcoholic. And because this was a county-run facility, you couldn't have alcohol on site. So Eli go out to the bars, time went on, come back, sneak in the back doors of the boiler and sleep in the boiler room, sleep it off. Well, unfortunately, one night he passed out back in the snow, and his friends found him and brought him down into the boiler room, but the damage was done and he passed away from exposure.
Eli still roams the halls of Hillview and has garnered quite a reputation for himself. The staff call him an inappropriate toucher, as he's known to stroke ladies' hair or pat their bottoms. He also still apparently likes a drink, even in the afterlife.
If Eli's around and you're using any type of like Ovulus, spirit box, anything like that, it's going to be something about drinking. I was walking down the hallway to the bathroom, and even when we're just doing walkthroughs, I have stuff running because you never know when you're going to have stuff happen. And I got, is it time for shots? Eli, are you kidding me? No, it is not time for shots. So I had my daughter with me once, who at the time was 12, and we were walking back through, and it came up, time for drinks. And she said, Eli, you're not allowed to drink in Hillview. And it went, haha, got you. So, Eli is like our first floor jokester, prankster. Eli is a great guy. We have activity with him constantly. One North is another personal favorite of mine. I love to just go down there and sit. You'll watch the shadows walking across the hallway. Sometimes they'll walk up to you and then turn around and walk away. I was never a big believer in flashlight sessions. I just felt that there was too much room for, human error. Not that anybody's faking anything, just human error.
Flashlight sessions are a test used by paranormal investigators using flashlights to communicate with the other side. It's a simple process where you leave a flashlight in a space, ask questions, and see if it flashes on or off as a response. Flashlights that tend to turn on by turning the head of the light are usually employed. The investigator will leave the head turned to a position where it is really neither on nor off, leaving a loose connection for the spirit to manipulate. However, some believe that this loose connection can be affected by knocks, bumps, or footsteps in the room. Some say that when the light is on and gets hot, all the inner mechanisms begin to expand and contract. And since the connection is loose and there is room to move, the light might switch by itself to the on or off position. Others say that, although this might be true, if you ask a spirit to turn a light on 3 times in a row and it does, then that itself is evidence of the test's efficacy.
I want to say it was the very first time I'd ever come here, and our tour guide at the time said, hey, everybody, if you have flashlights, please give them to me. And she's like, okay, line them up down the hall. One North is a huge, long hallway. So we just put them down at like random spots up along the hallway. And it was, can you turn the red one on? Can you turn the green one off? Can you turn the blue one on? And it was on the money every time. I was like, okay, you can't actually fake that.
Melissa, Sue, and Ken all affirm that for the most part, Hillview is a really happy place, and there isn't anything dangerous there. But that doesn't mean that it's never a dark or scary place. And it can change on a dime. One room might be filled with a warm energy, and the next might be an aggressive and even vulgar one.
We do have a room up on the 3rd floor. It's at the end of the hallway, and there's 2 rooms at the end of the hallway. If you look at the one room, it's real light and airy. The spirit that hangs out in there, his name is Joe Miller. And about 6 months ago, his son came through, Brian, and we went up and did spirit box sessions in there with him. And his father was actually answering him like
Personal question.
It was kind of like I'm standing there holding the spirit box, and it was getting a little bit emotional because he's, it's emotional for him. His father's talking to him. He knows his father's been gone for quite a few years. And
especially answering questions that only they know.
In one room, you have Joe communicating with his son from the other side, sharing a tender and warm moment. Yet, just across the hall, there lies a room with a pervasively dark energy, which is usually very vocal with people. And until former nursing staff came to Hillview to tour the property with the current staff members, they had no idea why that room would be such a contrast from Joe's across the hall.
The room to the left is dark. Like it's a dark room. Like if you look at the 2 rooms, the one to the left it looks dark. It looks creepy.
People always get through their spirit box or their devices, get the F out.
We did have our good friend Greg Nicholas came through, and we were up in that room with him. He's a psychic. He kept saying, my head hurts. I feel sick in here. He said there's lots of death. And here we found out when the nurses and staff members from, the older nurses and staff members that came through and did the tour with us, they told us that used to be a morgue at one point in time.
Yeah, we never knew that.
And we never knew. And that was like an aha moment. Like, oh my God, that's why you felt that way.
So dark.
When Sue goes in there, she feels the same thing. She'll feel, and I don't like that room because like Sue said, every time me personally, I go in there, whatever's in there does tell me to get the F out. He's like, I said, you want me in here? And he said, get that out. I'm like, okay.
Most of the hauntings at Hillview Manor are the former residents. But there is a very strange phenomenon that occurs in the building that is definitely not of this world.
We do have one on the second floor. We call him the creeper. He's never actually hurt anybody. He's looks like a dark, shadowy figure. He can run along the floor. It's a little unnerving when he'll run along the walls and the ceiling. He'll run up behind. Oh yeah, especially when you're walking through at 2:00 in the morning to do a walkthrough, and you hear footsteps running behind you, above you. Yeah, we just keep walking. He's never even touched anybody. He's just cranky and territorial. So we've been doing a lot of research, and we're lucky. We have a lot of like psychics and mediums that come through here. And a girl came through who is also affiliated with some Native American groups, because we know that this was all Native American land at one point. And she described all the activity and like collected a lot of data. She did us a massive favor with this. And they said what they call it, we called it a nature elemental. Like it was here first, that this was its territory. And because we built the building, it decided that the building was its too. And they're neutral. They're not good. They're not evil. They're just cranky and territorial. And she said when she spoke to the Native American tribes, they said that they call those soul collectors. They don't collect souls, but they're drawn to areas where there is a lot of like soul power.
He can take, it's funny because he'll take any shape he wants. That's why we think he's an elemental spirit. He can be real tall, real short. He'll go across the ceiling, go across the floor. He does, every once in a while, you will see him in like a human form, but for the most part, he's just like a blob. We were leaving the second floor the one night, and I was the last one coming through the main stairwell. And I actually stopped and leaned back and looked down the hall, and I seen a long, it was probably about 4 foot long, skinny black arm come out and wave by to me. So we have a lot of people that come here and go, oh, I'm going to try to find a creeper. Well, if you're looking for him, you're never going to find him. He likes that element of surprise to come up and scare you, and then he takes your scared energy and makes himself stronger.
The staff say that they're not afraid in Hillview. This is as much their home as it is the permanent residents. They're there all the time. They know the permanent residents by name and a little bit about how they were in life, which makes them not scary in death. But that doesn't mean that they haven't had some frightening moments that have definitely stuck with them.
We have a very strict rule at Hillview that we don't allow Ouija boards or seances for, very specific reasons. We have enough activity here. Well, unfortunately, a couple of times staff members have caught people with them, and we do throw them out. It's right in our rules. We go over it. It's right in the waiver that you sign that if you get caught with it, we're going to escort you off the property. And we did. And unfortunately, it has caused some problems for us. And in our one hallway, we've had a dark spirit prowling around at us. We were doing a live, and there is a woman, her name was Mary Aiello, and apparently she was a character in life because she has a character in death. She was born blind, so she had glass prosthetics. And when Mary would get bored, she'd take her prosthetics out and hide them in her bed and call for a nurse to make her bed. I mean, we've got that story from nurses, from her niece who was here. Mary's room seems to be almost this, we call it like a safety zone. Anything that's prowling around that's unfriendly, it's like they can't get in her room. Because we have the spirit of a little boy here named Jeffrey, who's 9, who's right across the hall from her and like down one room. And we've been finding him in her room quite a bit because whatever that dark entity is trying to take over his room. Well, we were up there one night doing a live, and we kept hearing this, like these sounds. It almost sounded like claws on tile in the room next to us. We're like, all right, what is going on? We stepped out into the hallway to look down, and my friend was filming, and we watched something with claws that was not human shaped, like start to crawl out of that room. And when it turned its head toward us, its eyes were red. And I grabbed her husband grabbed me, and we all jumped back into Mary's room, and that thing shot down the hall at us where we were. It's probably the only time in Hillview I've ever been frightened. It's only happened once. It's never repeated. We don't leave places. You know what I mean? We're so familiar with this. We're here all the time. I walked through the building without a flashlight, but we were like, yeah, you know what? I think we're done for the night. And we packed up and went downstairs. That is probably the only time I was truly frightened, because we have no idea what that was about. If it could have harmed us, but that wasn't a game I was willing to play. I was not willing to risk that. No.
The staff know the difference between their permanent residents and a spirit that may have found their way into Hillview, but is not grounded to the location. Because they have such a reverence and respect for their permanent residents, They do a lot of research into who each of the spirits who come through are. And what's so fascinating is that some of these former patients knew each other in life and still do in death. One such resident is Jimmy. Jimmy lived at Hillview from 1956 until 2004. He was an absolute character who was a prankster and a charmer in life, and is now a favorite spirit at Hillview because he's so sweet, endearing, and has such a great sense of humor.
We would probably call him today high-functioning autistic, but they said he had the mentality of like a 6 or 7-year-old. But he was always very fun, very clever. If somebody was having a bad day, he'd go and see them. They said he was just that guy. He was just awesome. He kept getting in trouble because there's a golf course behind here, and he kept going out and stealing people's balls. And then they'd come along and be like, hey, have you seen my golf ball? And he's like, no, but I can sell you this one for $1. The one guy who was here was a social worker. He said, do you know how many phone calls I got from that golf course about him? We had a spirit, and it's kind of sweet, but kind of sad, but we had a spirit named Amanda, who was a resident here. She passed away in 96. She was 103 years old, and she was in a wheelchair, and she wheeled herself outside to feed the birds every day. And she was starting to get dementia. And when she came back in, she turned around and wound up falling down a flight of stairs. Now, they did find her and get her to the hospital, but she died 2 days later. And her stairwell she's another one of our gentle spirits. So her stairwell is right there. And it was neat talking to staff members because how much the spirits interacted in life, or when they were, alive. And it explains why they're so interactive now, like they are aware of each other. Well, we were in 1 North, and Jimmy came down from 3. Jimmy kind of has the run of the whole building. Apparently he always did. So, and he kept saying he was sad. And I'm like, Jimmy, you're breaking my heart. Why are you so sad, baby? And Mandy fell. And we looked on the calendar, and it was the date that Amanda had fallen down the stairs. And that was it. I started to cry. Everybody started to cry. We're like, oh my God, Jimmy, are you okay? Very sad. Mandy fell and never came back.
Residents like Jimmy may have had a full and wonderful life at Hillview. But it would be remiss to say that that was the experience of all the residents. Depending on when in history you came to Hillview and under what circumstances, it could have been a very sad and lonely place. And the current owners and the staff are very aware of that. When the current owners bought the manor, the basement was filled with the unclaimed belongings and treasures of residents who had passed, but had no one to claim their property. There are still hundreds of boxes packed neatly away in the bowels of the building.
And there's still tons of patient belongings down there because the owner feels that it was entrusted to her when she bought the building. So, because people are like, oh, you should get rid of some of this stuff. She's like, I can't. She said, this was entrusted to me as part of this, ownership of this building.
Many times while talking with Melissa, Sue, and Ken, I had to remind myself that there are no living residents at Hillview, and there haven't been in nearly 2 decades. The staff are so committed to their permanent residents that they speak of them as though they are still alive. And in some ways, I suppose, they kind of are.
We love them. We feel like it's our responsibility to, take care of the place. We try and keep it up as much as we can. We love it. We make sure their rooms are clean. Some of them didn't have beds in their room anymore. We make sure we put beds back up for them. We put pillows, and people bring in sheets. And our frequent investigators here are so awesome. They did that. They brought in blankets for them. They bring toys for the kids. I mean, it's just, we love this place, and we feel they're our responsibility.
Everybody here was somebody that wasn't wanted anymore. They were a hassle to take care of them, or they had something wrong with them. So their family would just drop them off and never see them again. So you feel, I personally feel a lot of sadness here. I don't know if that's why I'm always bringing the spirits something or talking to them like they are somebody. I guess they're worth more in their death than they were when they were here.
So that's us. Come check us out. Come visit us. We'd love to see, anybody out here at Haunted Hillview. And again, you are welcome to bring your children. If you have any questions, either send us a private message through our Facebook page or send us an email at info@hauntedhillviewmanor.com.
They say you die twice, Once when your soul leaves your body, and the second time when your name is spoken for the very last time. Many of the residents at Hillview Manor led very sad, isolated, and tragic lives. But through the research and the investigation being done at this incredible facility, I hope these residents now feel seen, heard, and most of all, appreciated. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.